Okay, so for the sake of this episode, I thought it'd be prudent to bring in a dictionary.
Right. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is, it is a book?
Yes.
Okay. I was really worried about that one.
Yes, it's a book. It contains the words as well as the definitions of said words. And I thought it'd be good to get an ironclad definition of the, or at least a working ironclad definition of the word journalism for today's episode.
Which is game journalism.
Or lack thereof.
You know what's funny is that on the back of the chalkboard I put this arrow to remind me what way to write this so I don't get confused. And I mean, I lucked out, but that was close.
Yeah, well, you know, of the episodes we've done so far, I think it was the first time we mixed that up, so that's doing pretty well.
2 out of 3 ain't bad at all.
2 out of 3 ain't bad at all. Anyway, so journalism is defined as the work of a journalist. Regrettably, we have to do some page flipping. Journalist is a person writing or editing for a newspaper, etc. So we can include news broadcasts and other forms of publication. Now, just for the sake of...
But in etc., would you also consider magazines and tabloids, at this point blogs? Would you...
It would depend on the nature of said tabloid magazine blog, because each one sort of covers things differently. I think in this case we're going to deal with the traditional news, because that is their definition ingrained in us. That's the one like we're used to at this point. The meme, I guess, if you want to put it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
All right.
But there is still a distinction between a reporter and a journalist, because a reporter is somebody who is actively talking about it sort of as it's happening, or maybe they're on the field actually talking about it while it's going on in the background.
Yes, whereas a journalist is sort of saying things that they're doing research or looking to things that have happened. But again, just so we have the complete circle here, news is defined as information about important or interesting recent events. Now, we're talking about this, firstly, because I take great annoyance in the abuse of what I believe to be the term of game journalism, and the general belief that I hold that there essentially is no such thing, and that what is being defined so blatantly as game journalism, a word that to the human race pretty much entails research, a neutral stance. Actually, that pretty much covers the main things. Those are still 2 pretty big ones. Is being applied to essentially what is just game coverage. So now things that really would never fall into the realm of journalism are considered game journalism, and I think that using that term is leading people to trust and accept a lot of stuff that they really shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. Now, for me, one of the things about the definition of journalism is that I always try to look at how the word is defined, not just in this context, but in other contexts, because there is some crossover between the two. For example, you can also yourself have a journal. You're not necessarily a journalist, but you are writing down your own thoughts or your own opinions or whatever it is you want to write down, and you're keeping track of it, and it is based somewhat off current events. So a journalist could potentially be someone who is having a personal impact on what they're saying. Not to say that that's always the case, but that is a factor involved. With some websites who employ journalism or employ journalists, they determine who they hire somewhat based off their personality, because they want to make sure that these readers are coming to see what the person has to say about it. But because that person's opinion is a little more valuable than just like a random objective opinion.
Aha! But there we have 2 very important things. We have the idea of the person having a personality, or having that being some of the selling trait, and the idea that it's mostly based on their opinion. Now, do either of those fall under what we objectively believe to be as journalism, or is that now a different category of writing?
Well, in the context that you described, no. But a games journalist does have that as part of their job, is that they need to write reviews, which are subjective, because a game review is based off of personal experience. Movies as well, television as well.
Yes, obviously. But have you heard of a movie journalist?
You hear about movie critics.
Yes, but are they journalists? You see, the thing that bothers me is, again, this word comes with it a weight of trust. And you see a lot of people, well, let's take reviews. Reviews are the biggest thing anyone ever searches for on video games. Like, someone did some kind of look on Google, and just whenever looking for a video game, review is the most common word to come with it, even before walkthrough or let's plays or anything like that. So reviews are always based on the opinion. I can turn to you and say, like, I like this book, this is amazing, I can lend you this book. In fact, we actually had that happen a while ago, and you weren't a huge fan of the book. And that's perfectly fine. That's my opinion. That's your opinion. But their opinions based on, our reading it, our enjoying it, or not enjoying it. So I don't think we really would go to a news station and say, here's our review of a book, because that's not really news, that's not really journalism, that's not really, it's based entirely on our opinions, not on the actual book.
But when you look at when a review comes out, it's very rare that you will see a review later than the release date, significantly later than the release date. In fact, oftentimes those reviews are done more for humorous purposes or to look at it from an analytical point of view, like the Star Wars reviews on Red Letter Media. I mean, yes, they do review the films and they're funny, but it's mostly about looking at what happened to these movies and why are they considered a failure versus the original trilogy. So a review is done as quickly as it can get done because it needs to be relevant, and therefore I would consider review to be treated as news. A review is this game good? Is this game worth your money to you, the consumer? Well, you want to know right away, and so yes, it could be considered news, and therefore it could be part of a journalist's job description.
Well, but again, we're going back to the fact that if you have a journalist looking at an actual world event or something that occurred, obviously that world event happened. Mm-hmm. If you have a journalist that says, this game was amazing, etc., that's really, it's going back to the fact that it's an opinionated based thing. So can we really accept journalism as something based entirely on an opinion? Also, sort of what I wanted to add before is I have seen lots of reviews for games that basically have major updates, and therefore people will go back to them and review it. Mm-hmm. So that's
which I can consider to be news.
But again, it's based off opinions. You're not going to have everybody like every movie that comes out. You're not going to have everyone like every book that comes out. Following those and doing write-ups on those are considered reviews, and people who do it are not considered movie journalists or book journalists. But yet people who do reviews on video games or even do video game coverage are considered video game journalists. If we look even at just most of what comes out for video games, it's promotional and advertising materials. It's sort of ridiculous how I've heard people refer to video game trailers as forms of journalism. They're not. They're ads. They're designed to sell you a product. They're not designed to say, here are the facts, form your own opinion. It's here to influence your opinion, to affect your opinion. The editing, the music choice, the scenes they showed, are they pre-rendered? Are they in-game? Yeah. If they are in-game, are we going to have a little message at the bottom that says these were done with the in-game engine? It all comes, those are things that are designed to influence your opinion, and reviews are really just giving you... Well, okay, reviews are one aspect. We could spend this whole time going on reviews, but if we're going to talk about game journalism as a concept, we have to do more than just that, so...
Fair enough. Oh, you're done.
Yeah.
Well, because the internet changed the nature of how we get our news delivered to us, it has redefined what journalism could potentially be. And the thing that I noticed, having looked into this, is I've followed games coverage for a long time, probably around as soon as I really could start getting onto the internet. But it wasn't just the internet. You had games coverage on television. You had shows like Reviews on the Run. You had Video and Arcade Top 10, which was a lot less fun to watch than I thought it would be. You had magazines. I remember I subscribed to GMR for a year, which, little story about GMR, I would have loved for GMR to keep going. It was initially published by Ziff Davis. It lasted for about a year and a half. And I would subscribe to it, and we get it every month. And one month, it came with this special packaging that I never seen wrapped around it. And it was for the Nokia N-Gage. And Nokia...
Yeah, I can see where this is going.
Went all out to advertise this this new device. It was a phone that was
potato.
Also... Yeah, it was I mean, when you hold it up to your ear to talk, it felt like you were holding an overstuffed taco. Incidentally, several years later, phones now are a major gaming platform, so props to Nokia for having the right idea, just the wrong tech. You would have thought that because Nokia had spent so much money on advertising, especially for this magazine, and probably for other ones too, that it might have gotten a favorable review, and it didn't. It got a 3 out of 10, and it was called a piece of trash, to not to paraphrase. And I admired that because that was honest, and it was coverage by these game journalists that wasn't impacted by the fact that they were paid money to advertise their product. The problem is, generally speaking, you get the impression that the advertisers are telling the reviewers or the journalists to cheat a little bit, to maybe give this game a 9 when it's supposed to get an 8, to say it's really good when it's just kind of okay, because they want to make sure that this product sells, because they want to make sure that the people who are listening to this are registering it and are making that conscious decision when they go pick up a product in the store. Now, the difference is, in my opinion, between what we get on the internet, say from people who cover games like Total Biscuit or PewDiePie or whatever you fancy, is that we're gamers. We know we like this stuff. Our tastes are more specific. We don't just generally look at a game and go, oh, that looks great, I will get that. We're like, whoa, that looks good. But I want to know a little bit more about it. What's the mechanics like? What's the gameplay style? Is this something meant to be played in short bursts, or is this something that I can play for a huge stretch of time? Am I going to get a lot of playtime out of this, or is it going to be a very intense but short-lived experience? Neither of which are bad. It's just a matter of what I prefer. So it doesn't need to sell me on the fact that it's a game. It just needs to sell me on the right kind of game. Whereas, where I would define anybody who is a official game journalist is anybody who works in the industry prior to the way the internet had shaped it. So yes, I mean, there are websites, but there was websites where, you know, you might be able to leave a comment, but it was mostly owned by a company, IGN, owned by Fox Broadcasting, just as an example, where yes, it was on the internet and it was freely accessible, but it may as well have come to you in a magazine for all the impact that you as the user could have had on it. Anywhere you saw that kind of coverage, it wasn't so much to try to get a gamer to buy a game, it was to get somebody who hasn't decided what they're going to use their money on to be interested. It's somebody who might be sold on seeing a movie or renting a DVD or, you know, going on a trip somewhere as much as they might be sold on a game. Now, some games crave this kind of market. Games like Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA are massively advertised because they need these people to buy this kind of game. It's harder to sell it on gamers because gamers' tastes are more specific.
Not to mention things like sports games and Call of Duty tend to expire very quickly.
Exactly, and it's intentionally meant to go obsolete in a year because, lo and behold, they're going to sell the next iteration next year. If you recall, BioShock Infinite is an example of a game that, yes, was appealing to gamers because we know the developers, we know that they have a track record, a good track record, and quite frankly, it's beautiful and it's interesting product. I'm sold. But the fact that they spent so much money advertising this product meant that they wanted to make sure that this game got in the hands of people who don't have the same interest level that we do. That's what journalists are trying to do.
Well,
I'm trying to help do, sorry.
Well, yeah, I think you're again playing a little loose with the definition there. I would like to...
No, sorry, all right, I'll say it again. A journalist is somebody who covers games, who's working in the industry.
Okay, but through that, if we were to accept that as a definition, we've now pretty much cut out, I'd say 90% of the people who do their stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely my point. I wouldn't say that they're journalists.
Okay.
They are streamers. They are broadcasters. They might even be YouTubers, as we sort of are.
Yeah. Well,
But they're not part of a working industry. They don't work for a corporation. They don't have anyone else's interest in mind other than their own. So, if anything, you could also argue that they are the most honest definition of journalism, but as an official, term that you would put on your resume, they're not.
there's a couple of holes in that theory. I'd like to start off by saying, just as someone who's a fan of Total Biscuit, he has said time and time again, he's not a game journalism. He's not, a game journalist. He is not a reviewer. His WTF series, as he said several times, is just, it's a short burst of Let's Play with his opinions. He specifically shows everybody the options menu because he's primarily a PC gamer.
Yeah.
Let's face it, if they're porting a game, as a PC gamer, we want to see the options menu. We want to know it's been optimized. That is not something a lot of reviewers say, regrettably. So yeah, see, he said he's not a reviewer. The next problem is that there's a lot of people out there who do indeed make their name on YouTube and that kind of stuff, who've gotten contracts with websites like The Escapist, and they've become elevated because of The Escapist. Like, they're still essentially YouTube, we're doing what we want to, we're doing our opinion thing, but now because they have a bit of a name behind them, now they're considered journalists, even though, they're still just YouTube. Jim Sterling is a fantastic example. I've tried watching his stuff because it was recommended for me. I swear everything that comes out of his mouth is week-old information, and he does the whole angry Englishman thing, so he's insulting you at the same time as telling me absolutely nothing I don't already know. Like, he even had a whole episode where he was talking about, like, why the PS4 is beating the Xbone, and he's like, yeah, I know that, I agree with that, I like Sony better than Microsoft, like, yada, yada, stuff. And he says, you're just going to have to accept the fact that, they're doing better. It's like, I accept it, I endorse it. Like, I was like, see, because I'm right, and you're wrong. I'm smart, and you're, like, there's tons of examples, but basically I'm looking at this guy thinking, you're teaching me nothing. You're informing me of nothing I don't already know.
You're playing with fire here. Go on.
Charlie. But, okay, so, going back, we are defining them by...
Well, hang on a second. If Jim Sterling works for Escapist,
yeah,
then Escapist would be the same thing as, being working for IGN or working for some larger media corporation. I mean, yes, it's smaller than IGN, but it's still... probably it could even be registered as a corporation. So yeah, you are still working for someone else versus working for yourself.
Yes, but what is he doing besides getting a pass to E3? Like, what are his credentials, or what are his... games coverage is going to exist. It's going to continue to exist. Movie coverage exists. Books coverage exists. Sure. Yeah. These are all opinion-based things, and we want to know them. Like, my main concern is, this is games coverage. If we were to just drop journalism and call all this stuff games coverage, I'd be perfectly happy, because that is exactly what it is. It's only really when we give it a term that implies being impartial and, doing your research, that starts getting annoying, because most of these people are based on opinions. Another famous example I like of... This actually was PC Gamer, surprisingly. Like, if anyone would be a game journalism company, you think... a magazine that's been as long going, or just existed as long as PC Gamer would be. Blacklight Tango Down, the first incarnation. I haven't played the second, whatever the next second Blacklight Retribution, so one of the R words. That is going to bug me for a bit. But they gave that game, I think it was an 83 or something out of 100. Now, opinions aside, that game was broken. That, of the very few maps it came with, a third of them were vulnerable to spawn camping because of a mechanic placed in the game. Your ammo and your health booths were outside your spawn area. And on several of the maps, the enemy could push you back to your spawn and use your ammo stash to rain endless grenades inside your spawn area. Can you imagine that in any other game, any other first-person shooter, and just every time you spawn, because they're right there standing in your ammo dump, they can just throw endless grenades in. You're all spawning. It's one of those
things where you don't, I'll think of that and say, oh, I'm sure that's not a big deal. I'm sure I can find my way out of that. And then you actually get into the game and you're completely shut down. I mean, there's a difference between being in a difficult situation where you have to think and use skill and figure a way out of this versus you have been 100% obstructed, can't move.
You're all respawning pretty much at different times, unless they killed you at the same time. If any of you try to get out through a side, if any of you miraculously don't get grenaded and try to get out through a side entrance, the game mechanic lets you see through walls. You just can't shoot while doing it. So they can tell you're using the side exit, and there's more than one of them there. And if they get injured, well, they're right next to your health thing too. And there was at least 3, I want to say 4 of the maps where this was a mechanic, where they could, push you all the way back and do this. And like this is a fundamental flaw in game design. Like this is something that I go into a server, and of the 7 or so maps this game comes with, 3 of them have this mechanic in it. 3 of them I could get pushed back to my base and grenades. That is that's a broken game. Like there's no way something like that should have shipped. And yet, again, that was completely ignored in the review, and that actually made me drop PC Gamer. Like, how could you have not noticed this glaring flaw?
Okay, now I'm going to try answering that question, assuming it wasn't completely rhetorical, from the perspective of PC Gamer. Now,
go ahead.
I've always enjoyed reading reviews after the fact. Like, my decision on when I'm going to buy a game most times has already been has been set in stone, right? But it is always great to have the review to read when the game is out, because you would want to know whether or not this game is terrible right away. Now, from the reviewer's point of view, which would you say he's a game journalist, or would you say he's just an editor who works for?
I think it is further showing the problems inherent in reviews. If we can't go so far as to trust a magazine like PC Gamer, which is strong enough to exist without total ad revenue. If NVIDIA decides they're going to stop advertising PC Gamer, that's going to be a blow. But AMD, thank you.
AMC is the channel, or movie theaters if you're in the GTA.
Okay, so AMD is still going to advertise. Like, they're a magazine that can afford to turn around and say this graphics card is bad, this whatever thing is bad.
Okay, but so
IGN also gave Colonial Marines an 80.
We'll get to that. The point I'm going to make is that you only have so much time to review a game, and usually reviewers have criteria. They're going to look at graphics. They're going to look at sound design. They're going to look at replay value. How much time are you actually going to spend playing this game? Like I mentioned earlier, is this a short, quick experience, or is this something that I can invest a lot of time into? They're going to look at the actual controls and how does it feel to play the game. What they're not going to look at are these mechanical errors. Granted, it is a major one, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be fixed or patched out, but you patch that, the issue is no longer there, the rest of the game is still working. That part of the game is what the reviewer is trying to look at, because a reviewer should know that a developer is going to get rid of this kind of problem. I'm not going to print a review in a magazine, which is now there forever until all the variations of that magazine are wiped off the face of the planet, and say, this game was great, too bad it's broken. It's going to get fixed.
No, that is, I'd say that would be the job of an objective person, to warn that currently it is broken. Developers have said on their blog or whatever that they're going to fix it. I think that's an obligation of anyone who's going to be doing something like that. If the game release is broken, then they should say, hold off and see if this gets fixed. Or something. They shouldn't say...
They should say that on games where we understand that it's a perpetually growing game, like an MMORPG. Everybody knows that an MMO needs at least a year before it starts finding its legs. Whereas a game like this, I'm sorry, but if I'm going to say that, I'm going to say it on something that's a little more personal, if anything. It's not going to get past the editor. It doesn't... I mean, I'm not going to start stating things that are wrong in every game review that I would put out.
Well, okay. Back to the Colonial Marines example. They did release a massive 3 gigabyte patch that was supposedly going to fix everything. So are you saying that at release, they shouldn't have said the AI is completely stupid and will ignore you, that you can't get through doors because your commando buddies seem to insist on piling inside it?
Okay. Well, the difference between these two is that in the other one, this was an exploit that needed discovering. Yes, it sounds like it could be discovered a little easier than exploits are supposed to, granted. But the problem with Aliens Colonial Marine was that it was broken piece by piece by piece. Like, AI was bad. It didn't look or it didn't play the same way it looked in the footage. That was one of the major problems, is that people saw footage of the game and they thought, oh, that's what the game's going to look like. That looks great. But then they played the game and it's like, what the hell is going on? Now, when it comes to the overall result of the Colonial Marines, I'm totally on the same side as you. That game was not done but it came out, and they tried to fix it. Sorry, I forgot the name of the other game. Blacklight. That, to me, just sounds more like an issue that they didn't catch, that they probably should have spent a little more time testing, but overall, they went with it.
All right, I don't feel like we should spend too long on these particular two examples, but
we can move on. But...
Well, I would like to just iterate: your health and ammo dumps were outside your spawn area, so anyone could access them, and that alone doesn't strike you as well. Like, shouldn't they be inside the spawn where only you can access them?
It doesn't sound like the best design decision ever made, but there are still people making these games. It's just the point with Aliens Colonial Marine is that you're talking about a game that was promised AA quality and they got B-, versus, okay, this is the game we're giving you. Oh shit, we fucked up. We'll fix that.
Also, final point, Blacklight was on Games Windows Live. You can't.
Oh, well then that game is a piece of crap. Oh, what? Why didn't you just say that like 10 minutes ago?
Well, you can't, Microsoft was charging you ridiculous amounts.
Are you going to do that every time I start appreciating something? And be like, by the way, it's Games Windows Live.
You never even played it, so why were you fighting for it so hard?
I was trying to look at it from their point of view. Devil's advocate.
Okay. Games Windows Live doesn't make the games, but it does charge the developers an arm and a leg to patch their games. So God knows any game that was on Games Windows Live, and God, it's gone, pretty much was doomed if it didn't release perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it wasn't getting patched. But all right, I feel like we're spending a lot of time reviews, which definitely is the biggest category of what would be considered game journalism. So I'd like to basically make a statement right now, or have some kind of answer right now. What do we think of trailers, especially those released by companies? Is that journalism, or is that just plain coverage?
If a trailer is released by a company, there was no journalist involved, so it can't be journalism.
So game trailers definitely off the list, not journalism. Okay, what would we think if the game company itself shows a segment, like if the game company does a let's play of themselves.
Okay.
You see a lot of these at E3, like hey, we're gonna have this little level from this new game.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna show you a bunch of people playing it. Is that journalism?
That would be promotion.
That would be promotion. Can we just rule out E3 as all promotion?
E3 is supposed to be a trade show so that members of the industry can see what's going on and decide what they're interested in picking up, what they're interested in well, I wouldn't say publishing. Usually,
it's a hype train.
Already figured out. It's strange because E3 used to be this incredible, almost mythological event that every gamer would want to go to, because it's just 3 days straight of not only games but games that aren't out yet. Whereas now, there's so much coverage of E3 that we realize that it's mostly just schlock. You don't need. You don't need attractive women who are half clothed to stand around and promote a game. It brings nothing to the table.
It also, if you go to something like Anime North, you are attending it with other fans. There's going to be fans who dress up. There's going to be fans who know everything about this particular continuity.
But that's a convention, though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think back in the origin document, E3 was a bit more convention. I do know they recently banned cosplaying, so that was something they were okay with for a while.
Well, the issue that I have with E3 and with that side of the games industry is an issue that I know that I would bring up in a lot of different aspects, is that you're dealing with a bit of a generational gap, but you're also dealing with a bit of an influential gap, because I think people who spend a lot of time doing their own research and figuring out their own taste, like I said earlier, probably don't care as much about E3. They just climb aboard the hype train and hope something exciting gets mentioned. And what was the takeaway from E3 2014? It was just more of the same.
Yeah.
I was kind of sort of super hyped for the new Zelda, just saying.
It's Dynasty Warriors.
No, that's Hyrule Warriors. They show the trailer for the new Legend of Zelda game.
Okay.
And it looks kind of pretty good, so I'm smiling. But
wrong hand.
Whatever. But overall, the takeaway was, we've seen everything. All the Halo is going to be on the new Xbone, and Assassin's Creed 4 now with less girls, and I mean, you get a couple of original stuff here or there, but for the most part, it's like I said, the kind of games that need to sell to everyone, not just the gamers.
Yeah. I'm a little, okay, I guess embarrassed is the wrong word. I'm a little hesitant to admit I actually was one of the people who thought Assassin's Creed would be nice if it had some cooperative missions, but I was thinking 2 people. Because if you're going to do an assassination, the idea of having 2 people, one of them going through the side, taking on the guard, etc., that seemed cool. Don't throw 4 people in there, like, that's not assassination anymore. That's just running around being bullies. Like, it's a little, like, especially from all the environments I played in Assassin's Creed games, like, having 4 people running around the building at the same time is 4 chances to get discovered. Yeah, or you're all grouping together, in which case you can't really free flow combat the same way you're used to in the game.
I'm just picturing this this Ocean's 11 thing now, where you're gonna have like 20 assassins all walking in a line, and
blend.
One of them's hiding in the briefcase. And why stop at 4? Why not have 50 assassins? And, okay. You all know why you're here today. Yeah.
Oh, and no girls allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've knocked a bunch of things off the list. So what can we consider still remaining on the list? We've pretty much knocked out the trade show. We've knocked out trailers, knocked out all this stuff in general. We still kind of have reviews, which I think we really touched on. I do agree with you. It really matters who's doing it, but at the same time, it's hard to call it a journalistic industry.
There are still...
There are trustworthy people.
There are developments that need coverage. It's not always necessarily reviews or previews, for that matter, because a preview is kind of like a review, not quite written in advance. You kind of know what it's going to be. You hope it comes together, but generally you have the idea for, okay, is this game going to be good, or is this game going to be unsatisfying? Obviously, it's not the review, but I would put the preview kind of with the review. But there are still things that just happen. Developers get laid off.
Yeah.
A game gets delayed or a game gets canceled. I mean, that's news, and you need somebody to cover that. So would you say that people who write about that are journalists? Or would you say that they're just reporters because they're staying objective and there's really not much that they need to say personally on it?
Okay, so that is definitely one to think about. That's not necessarily advertising or showing off a game or anything like that. It's actually happening to physical people who work in the game industry.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that if people want to call that particular kind of coverage a form of journalism, then I will accept that. I still think that most of the people who do it are are reporters, because most of the time, let's face it, everything they report on has been posted on Twitter already, so they're just taking off that. But that actually is an event that has happened. That's not trying to sell you a product. That is not an opinion, because someone actually has left for this reason. So, yes, I would say that is definitely objective reporting, and if you call it journalism, I won't necessarily fight you on that. Speaking of which, have you ever heard of a good video game news or whatever related story involving Twitter?
No, not one. It seems like every time something happens on Twitter, it's because somebody exploded.
Yeah, no, just, it's one disaster after another. Game industry, please, stop using Twitter. It's not helping.
And that's mostly because if you need to explain yourself, you're not going to be able to do it in 140 characters.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck that loser certainly fits. Although I think that was on Facebook.
Yeah, that was...
Where people are saying less than 140 things on purpose.
That was...
That was Jay Wilson.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, after the original development team who had worked on Diablo 2... They didn't say Diablo 3 was bad.
Yeah,
they just said it's not the game that we would have made because ours would have been way better. It's not the game that we would have made.
And that guy was like, he was something peripheral, like he was sound, or he was something weird like that. And he just said, wow, I feel like I've been thrown under the bus, and just that whole explosion thing. My best memory of a Twitter blow up was someone arguing for, or like someone working for Microsoft arguing for, like, hey, always online DRM, let's do the always online. Someone even commented, like, my friend doesn't have the internet, he can't afford it, every month, he still wants to play games. And he responded, like, well, he really should get the internet, it's really handy. And there was some comparison to a vacuum cleaner made at some point, and not all of us have the internet. Like, I do.
Well, clearly everybody watching this has the internet.
Yes, clearly.
Has the internet.
But, it's... despite what everyone thinks umbilically attached to their smartphones, it is possible to get through this world without being completely and totally attached to the internet every moment, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's lots of people who went through their entire college and university years only checking email whenever they're at the library. So, I mean, it's...
But I certainly think that ties back into the generational gap, because our generation and the ones after us, and I guess maybe the age brackets a little bit ahead of us, now getting into their mid-30s, maybe early 40s, the internet has such a dramatic influence on their lives that it is difficult to see how they would live without it. And I think that's just getting harder and harder, because there's so much more that you can do on the internet than what, people who are like in their 50s or 60s have access to.
Yeah, but generally speaking, a comment like that was pretty, I think we all agree that was a pretty stupid comment, pretty inappropriate. I mean, once upon a time, as we discussed in our Valve episode, or our Steambox episode rather, a game console was, here's your console, here's the game, plug it all in, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that people still want that package is entirely reasonable and entirely, supported. Like, why wouldn't you want that package? So, I mean, that was really the whole with the always online DRM, and we may have wandered a little bit off topic. I'm sorry about that. All right, so avoid Twitter, and yeah, we pretty much agreed that the only thing you really consider to be game journalism is when you talk about the people working in the industry, because that is tangible to the sense that you're not trying to sell a product.
Now, where would you say that you get your feedback or your coverage from as a gamer?
As a gamer, well, as I said, I've watched a lot of Total Biscuits stuff. Total Biscuits.
By the way, so sorry to hear about the cancer. We hope you beat that boss.
But I follow most of his stuff because he's turned around and said he doesn't do reviews. He doesn't do that kind of stuff. I find he is one of the most objective people on the internet because he's claimed, full disclosure, I'm not objective. Like, these are all my opinions. So even though that's what you're getting with everybody, the fact that he's so open with it is very refreshing. So I've never used him as a final, decision-making thing. But, if I'm thinking about Devil May Cry or the DMC and I can't decide between the PC version or the console version, I know I can watch his WTF is, and the first thing he's going to do, here's the optimization menu. Yes, it runs smoothly. Yes, it runs this. These are my specs for my computer, so you can compare. But beyond that, I guess I usually just use my own opinion. I mean, I consider myself to be an educated consumer. I'm aware of what most people pull. I really just don't buy games on release anymore. I usually wait for either the price to drop or at the very least to get a bunch of people's opinions. I mean, one of my favorite games is Sanctum 2, and one of the issues with it at release was that it had a lot of things that could be exploited for grieving or for annoying people. Like, you're playing with random people online.
Better or worse than Blacklight in terms of exploits?
It was more of an annoyance.
Okay, fair enough.
But essentially, they had that fixed really quickly. So, that was something that, I heard this was an annoying issue, so I just kept following news, and they said, hey, we released a patch, we've changed it, so it works more like the first game, so everything's A-okay. Everything is now shareable via different means, etc.
Yeah. Well, for me, assuming you're done.
Yeah.
Okay. I started following games with the GameCube, and around that time, the internet was finally in my household. And at that time, I was reading IGN pretty much every day. There were other websites. I also read Game Revolution a lot. I occasionally went to GameSpy, but I never really trusted it because he was a spy. But
a very valid point.
Yeah, but to this day, I still read IGN. Now, I don't particularly use their reviews as my final decision, like you said. Especially ever since they gave Skyward Sword a 10 out of 10. Now, I'm not an authority on Zelda or anything, but I would not give Skyward Sword a 10 out of 10. The game wasn't finished. You get to the third act and there's no dungeons. They had to do this challenge where you dive into a lake and you have to pick out a bunch of musical notes.
What?
Yeah,
Was there a musical instrument in
they-
Skyward Sword?
there was the harp, and it wasn't
It wasn't an ocarina.
it wasn't pertinent to the challenge. Now, had they had the time to put the dungeons in, I'm sure the dungeons would have been fine. But it is impossible not to notice that when you're playing it, because usually the third act or the later acts are supposed to be more difficult and not less difficult. It's clear that happened. Would I give the game a 9 out of 10? Yeah, for sure. Still a great game. Would I give it a masterpiece? No. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. But that ties into what I was saying earlier, is that the journalists of IGN have responsibility. They need to make sure that this game sells, because I'm certain that Nintendo has some revenue given to IGN or given to Fox or whatever.
It has been.
So I understand that for a game like this, for as big of a deal that the major Zelda release for a Nintendo console is, I don't think anyone's being hurt by being told that this game is a masterpiece and you should get it. Objectively and subjectively, I completely disagree. But when it comes to finding out what's new in terms of AAA or big title releases, I still use IGN as a great resource. And I find that the coverage is effective, and they always get it as quickly as anybody else gets it. When it comes to something more specific, I find Let's Plays are phenomenal. It's great to actually see the game being played. I think if you actually sat down and watched somebody play the entire game, you're kind of wasting your life a little bit, so maybe just watch a little bit of it. So I think that's great, and I think it's one of the best things about the internet now, because we're not being fooled or misguided or even slightly misdirected. We get to see the game for ourselves. And even if we don't agree with what the player is saying, we can still have a pretty good idea of what we're going to think of the game because we're watching it being played.
Yes, absolutely. Machinima example.
You would have to specify that.
Well, yeah, just
I don't want to talk about it.
I'm just kind of shooting down most of what we just said. There was an example on Machinima a while ago.
Couldn't possibly have shot down everything I just said. There are bad examples. That doesn't ruin everything.
Okay, there was nevertheless an incident on Machinima a while ago where a contract was leaked. This contract was between the people running Machinima and the people providing content for it.
Mm-hmm.
This contract was put together by the people running Machinima and Microsoft. The idea was that there were a certain number of conditions when it came to doing various videos for games on the Xbone. If you include this particular hashtag, you don't say anything negative about the game or the console.
I think it was like you can be critical, but as long as you're constructive. And
no, it full on said nothing
Okay.
negative.
Well, I'm thinking of a different example, but go ahead.
But essentially, it had a series of conditions like that, and if fulfilled, you would get additional revenue. Like, it wasn't directly money; it was something that led to money. I forget. Like, there's some kind of point tracking system on that site. But the idea was that, they were essentially paying people to not say anything negative. And on the very contract, it said you are not allowed to discuss or reveal the existence of this contract.
Mm-hmm. And
that's actually illegal. That is full on blown illegal.
Yeah. In response to that, I did see, or I did read documents or emails that have been sent to Total Biscuit saying, listen, can you cover this game for us, and can you say this, this, and this, or not say this, this, and this, and we'll pay you this. And he's refused each and every time because he doesn't want to compromise his integrity.
He's also said, he's closed some videos with a little text or put in the comment section like, we were paid to play a round of Guns of Icarus against these people. So everyone involved were famous broadcasters. They were paid. Everything they're saying was true, but the idea was they were brought to Guns of Icarus because the company said, hey, we want to promote our game a little bit. Can you guys just do a match against each other and put the video on YouTube? So I mean, he's you can be honest. You can't say like, hey, this company said do a match, and
I don't think I would respect him any less for something like that. You still want to make a living off of it.
Yeah, he was perfectly honest. He said like, hey, they didn't say they didn't pay him for his opinion. They just paid him for the coverage.
Yeah.
And, there's been suspicions of stuff like that, I think, for years. I mean, a lot of people have commented that sites that are dependent on reviews get a lot of visits and thus ad revenue
Yeah.
if they have the reviews up, early, if they have them on time, etc., etc. And if they start giving games bad reviews, it's perfectly within the company to not quite give them the games as early. Like, hey, this site, gave us a good review in the last game. Like, here's their copy. Oh, yours must have gotten lost in the mail. Don't worry, you'll get it in a day or so.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfectly possible for companies to start doing that. So if you start turning around saying these are horrible games, then maybe the entire publisher is going to decide maybe these people aren't going to receive these games at the same time as everyone else, or not at all.
Right.
And thus you lose visitors to your site because you're losing content or not getting the content as quickly. So it is within the site's best interest to turn around and say that, this is good, because that's how they keep in business.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help but get the impression that a publisher cares more about whether or not this sells versus whether or not it's any good.
Yeah.
You would hope in a perfect system, game comes out, it's pretty good, gets a lot of coverage by a lot of reviewers, and that gets a lot of people to buy it. Doesn't always work that way.
No.
You have income brackets, is one thing. People maybe only have the budget to buy 2 or 3 games a year. When I was younger, I only had so much money, so I was one of those people. I can only buy so many games. There was Prince of Persia and Beyond Good and Evil came out the same day, both great games, but I wasn't able to pay full price for either of them. You can only have so much. But what the review did was it showed me that this game was good, and so now I know that if the opportunity comes along for me to get this game, I probably should get it. And I later on picked it up used for like $4 because that game got marked down kind of drastically.
Yeah, that's...
But I think
probably
now...
do a whole episode on that, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think nowadays, the great thing about a review is that you don't necessarily feel like you have to get it done on time. Obviously, it helps a lot, especially if you're part of the working industry, to get it done on time. Yes, but a good review is something that can stay permanently and can always be something there for the game, so that if the game goes on sale on Steam, for example, it's like, oh, this game's on Steam. I wonder what the reviews were for. It came out a couple of years ago. You can look up online. There's a whole ton of them, and they're all good reviews. So there you go. The game has sold in the long run.
Yes.
And that's where I think a lot of these problems come in, is that it's all about how do we get these short-term profits, because we need to look good in front of the investors when our quarterly is coming up, versus what is our actual strategy going to be? Are we going to, try to get this game to sell in the long run? Are we going to keep working on it? Are we going to keep improving it? Is this something that we're going to dedicate a lot of time to? A lot of Blizzard games are successful for that reason. They're pretty good when they come out, even if not everybody agrees with that. And then they get better. They get patched. There's new content added into it for free until the expansions have been pretty good, as far as voter destruction goes. But I feel like with the games industry in the old sense is that if the game doesn't sell well and it's like its first weekend, like it's a movie in the box office, then it's basically done. And thankfully, because games are available digitally on the internet, it's less of a problem now, because you don't have to worry about its physical shelf life. You just have to worry about the quality and whatever coverage it was able to get.
And, sir, we're agreeing that generic advertisement is definitely not journal. That's advertisement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, actually was this hilarious example I'd like to tell you about. Now, admittedly, I once had a Games Windows Live account. I wanted to play Dawn of War.
I wanted to play Bioshock 2. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. So, one of the funny things about it...
Only just worth it. We're talking on the cusp of worth it.
Really, because I got patched and I couldn't get into it.
You poor thing.
There was, I think it was the second patch or something, locked 10% of the population out of the game for unexplainable reasons, and it's going to be fixed when the third patch comes out, once the third patch comes out. You can still play multiplayer. I did not buy this for the multiplayer.
We can do a whole episode about how DRM is supposed to protect piracy, but all it really does is mess up people who are following the
I
law.
I feel like beating a dead horse at this point, but I am very
True.
passionate. I'm very passionate about that topic, but I'm passionate in the sense that I'm picking up a stick and hitting too.
Sometimes it's nice to join the circle jerk.
It's always. But anyways, even though I told it I only had a PC and not an Xbox 360, which was at the time, it didn't seem to realize I had a PC. It thought I was a 360 player. So one day, and this was not April, I think it was like November or something, several years ago, they sent me this little advertising thingy that they wanted me to send to other friends. Now, I swear to God, I am not making this up. The first thing you'd select was, the first line, followed by the second. Now, the first line was something along the line of, hey buddy, hey coworker, hey girlfriend, hi, whatever, like variants on that. It's basically greeting.
Girlfriend, that was nice of them.
Yeah, basically
Or
greeting
boyfriend,
someone.
it's 2014.
Well,
Or whatever year it was at the time.
there's female gamers.
Gays, too.
Yeah, but anyways, like you'd have the line, and the second line would be something along would be buy an Xbox or get your own Xbox or it's time to get an Xbox or something like that. Now you would also select a dummy. I believe there was Gorilla Suit, possibly Robot. I know there's a third one, but I can't remember it. And you would also take a picture of a person, presumably whoever you're sending it to, and you would put it right on the dummy. And then you select an object, such as a pillow. And then what would happen...
He's got a pillow. That's great.
And then what would happen is you send it to someone, and it'd be this very short flash cartoon repeating, saying, hey buddy, hey girlfriend, hey whatever, buy an Xbox, buy an Xbox, buy an Xbox, buy an Xbox.
So much work!
Buy an Xbox!
Can't you just say buy the Xbox and get Bill Cosby?
I'm not making this up. This was an actual ad campaign that Microsoft launched.
They literally beat you over the head with the message.
No, they had you beat other people over the head with the message. I sent it to myself as a joke, and I never received it. So, thankfully, somebody turned around and said, shit, we can't. But even if it was April, I'm really, really, really sure it wasn't April. But even if it was April, that's not even an appropriate joke. This is an actual legitimate ad campaign. They wanted me to beat someone else over the head to get them to buy a console, which even I didn't endorse in.
Now, I, for one, as the person who received this beating, can say that I don't want to buy an Xbox, but I do like that pillow. It was quite soft.
Here you go.
No, I'm not even kidding. This is legitimately soft.
Oh, my cat sleeps on it.
I gathered that from the hairs.
Mm.
Because the problem that I have with the pillow is that my head is always like raised further than my body. I never feel like I'm lying down
I have the
properly on it.
opposite one. Like I've got the pillow I use is
Do you mind?
really small. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, you were saying?
Oh, well, just mine's the opposite. Anyways, well, good episode. I'll get the lights.
Can you give me another glass of water?
Sure.